My sister turned her wedding into my stage for humiliation. She sat me at the reject table, paraded me as still single at 32, and smirked when she tossed the bouquet past me so the whole crowd could laugh. I held my head high, ready to walk out and leave her perfect day untouched. Then a stranger leaned close, his voice steady. "Act like we're a couple." From that moment, everything flipped. Her fairy tale cracked in front of everyone, and trust me, that was only the beginning. Before I dive in, hit tell me where you're watching from and let me know if I was right or wrong in what came next. I'm Emily, 32 years old, a marketing manager who works too many hours, drinks too much coffee, and according to my family has made one unforgivable mistake: I'm still single. You wouldn't think that one detail would define an entire person, but for my sister Lydia, it was all the ammunition she needed. Lydia and I were never close. She was the golden child, homecoming queen, cheer captain, the one who got every ounce of praise while I was told to be more like her. When she got engaged to Richard, a banker from a wealthy family, the gap between us turned into a canyon. She didn't just enjoy being the bride-to-be, she weaponized it. Every dinner, every family gathering, she slipped in a jab, smiling sweetly as she asked if I'd lowered my standards yet, or if I had finally tried dating apps again. Our mom, Diane, would nod along with that sympathetic sigh that's meant to feel comforting, but really just twists the knife. My dad, Adam, would change the subject, desperate to keep the peace, but Lydia never stopped. She seemed to feed off my silence as if every ounce of embarrassment she wrung out of me made her shine brighter. The morning of her wedding, she called me with a voice dripping in fake concern. "Emily, honey," she said, stretching the word like she was talking to a child. "I know today might be hard for you, seeing everyone so happy. Just try not to look too miserable in the photos." "Okay." I bit my tongue. What was I supposed to say? That I was happy for her? That I didn't mind being the punchline? Instead, I hung up and tried to convince myself I could survive one day. Just one day. I spent weeks picking out my dress, a navy gown that made me feel elegant without screaming for attention. I wanted to look good, but not like I was competing. I wanted to feel like I belonged in the pictures, even if no one saw me as part of the story. When I arrived at Grandview Manor, the reception hall looked like a scene out of a magazine. Golden lights hung from chandeliers, crystal glasses sparkled on white linen tables, and violins hummed through the air. It should have been magical. Instead, all I could focus on was the piece of paper in my hand. Table 12. Mary and Lydia's maid of honor walked me there with a smile too sweet to be real. "Oh, Emily, here's your spot," she chirped, leading me to a table shoved in the back corner, near the swinging kitchen doors. Servers bustled past balancing trays of food, while my table mates, a few of Lydia's single co-workers, and our cranky great-aunt Janet barely acknowledged me. That was the first sign. Lydia hadn't just overlooked me. She'd planned this. Every detail from the seating chart to the introductions was designed to remind me I wasn't part of her fairy tale. I was the shadow she wanted everyone to laugh at, and the night was only getting started. It didn't take long before the whispers started. At first I told myself I was imagining it, but then I saw it. Lydia's bridesmaids clustered near the bar, eyes flicking toward me as one of them pointed, their laughter spilling out like champagne bubbles. It was the same laugh Lydia had used when we were teenagers, showing off my awkward yearbook photo to her friends. Some habits never die. And this night, she wasn't just my sister. She was the star of her own show, and I was the punchline. Every introduction became a performance. Lydia paraded me in front of Richard's wealthy relatives, her hand resting proudly on his shoulder, her voice cutting sharp under the veil of sweetness. "This is my sister Emily," she said, smiling so wide it hurt to look at. "She's our career girl, still focusing on work instead of finding someone special." Their reactions were all the same: tight smiles, tilted heads, sympathetic nods. Then came the advice, uninvited and relentless. "Oh, don't worry, dear. There's someone for everyone. Have you tried a church group?" My aunt waited until she was 50 and found love with a widower. 6 children, but still love is love. Each word landed heavier than the last. By the time Richard's business partner suggested I should lower my standards, my chest was tight, my throat raw. I wasn't Emily anymore. I was Lydia's cautionary tale. Even the photographer seemed in on it. When it came time for family pictures, he asked no +1. His brows knit together when I shook my head. He snapped the shot anyway, capturing me frozen between smiling couples, my forced grin stretching like glass about to crack. I told myself I could make it through. Just survive the nightstand in the shadows, let her bask in her spotlight. But Lydia wasn't satisfied with quiet cruelty. She wanted an audience. The DJ's voice thundered through the hall, all the single ladies to the dance floor. I froze, my hands clenched under the table. I prayed to disappear into the wallpaper, but Marion Lydia's loyal maid of honor spotted me. She grabbed my arm with a too bright smile. "Come on, Emily. This could be your chance." And just like that, I was shoved into the circle. 20-something girls bouncing in heels, squealing with excitement, their futures wide open. I felt ancient, exposed, and utterly alone. Lydia stood before us, bouquet in hand, eyes locked on me with that smirk I'd come to dread. For a split second, I let myself hope. Maybe she'd throw it my way. Maybe she'd give me a scrap of kindness. But no. She turned, aimed, and launched it in the opposite direction. The bouquet landed in the arms of a cousin, half my age. The crowd erupted in cheers. "Emily will have to wait a little longer." Lydia shouted loud enough for the chandeliers to shake. The laughter that followed was sharp slicing straight through me. My chest burned, my vision blurred. I wanted to scream, to cry, to vanish. Instead, I walked back to my table, clutching my purse like a lifeline. That was the moment I decided to leave, to give her the victory she wanted, to disappear before she could humiliate me again. But just as I reached for my bag, a low voice behind me cut through the noise. "Act like you're with me." I turned startled and found myself staring at a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a charcoal suit that looked custom-made. His expression wasn't pity, it was purpose. His eyes locked onto mine as if he'd already decided something. "Excuse me," I whispered. "Your sister just spent 10 minutes telling my business associate how worried she is about you being alone," he said, sliding into the empty chair beside me as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I figured you might want to even the score." I blinked at him, my pulse still pounding from the bouquet fiasco. "You don't even know me." "William," he said, extending his hand. "Richard's cousin. And you're Emily, the sister who apparently needs saving from eternal spinsterhood." I laughed, but it came out shaky. "That's me, the family charity case." "Not anymore," he said, his voice steady. Then he draped his arm casually along the back of my chair, close enough that anyone watching would notice. It didn't take long. Across the room, Lydia's eyes found us. Her smile faltered. The bride who had orchestrated my humiliation was suddenly off script. I felt the power shift, subtle but undeniable. When she finally approached her wedding train, sweeping behind her like a weapon, her tone was brittle under the sweetness. "Emily, I didn't know you knew William." "Old friends," William said smoothly, his hand brushing against mine on the table. "We lost touch, but you know how these things go." I met her gaze steady for the first time all night. I like to keep my private life private. I said the words sharp with irony. Her eyes narrowed. How wonderful she managed her tone, souring under the smile. She retreated, but not before glancing back at us. Confusion etched into every line of her face. The rest of the evening, William played the role to perfection. He laughed at my jokes, asked about my work, listened like no one else had all night. And he did it all within view of Lydia and her carefully curated audience. Each time his hand brushed mine, I saw the shift around us. Richard's relatives, who had looked at me with pity hours earlier, now studied me with curiosity, even respect. The same aunt who suggested church groups leaned over during dinner and whispered, "He's such a gentleman." "How long have you two been together?" "Long enough," William answered before I could speak, his eyes dancing with mischief. For the first time all night, I wasn't invisible, and Lydia knew it. I could see her whispering to Marion, could see the cracks forming in her perfect composure. The woman who had spent years making me feel small suddenly looked rattled. And that was when it hit me. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was my chance to turn her stage into mine, my chance to make sure she'd never forget the night she tried to break me. So when William leaned close and murmured, "She looks like she's about to explode," I didn't just smile. I made a decision. The next move wouldn't belong to Lydia. It would belong to me. The band struck up a slow song, and William didn't hesitate. He stood, offered me his hand, and said simply, "Dance with me." It wasn't a question. It was an invitation to step into the spotlight, and for once in my life, I wanted to say yes. As he led me to the dance floor, I could feel the stares. Every pair of eyes that had rolled or pitied me earlier now followed our every step. William's hand rested firmly on my waist, guiding me effortlessly, like he had done this 1,000 times before. "You know she's watching," he murmured, lips close enough that only I could hear. "I know," I said, glancing over his shoulder. Lydia stood near the head table, her bouquet replaced by a champagne flute clutched too tightly, her jaw locked in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looks like she's about to explode. William's chuckle was low, almost conspiratorial. "Good," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. We spun under the chandeliers, and the room that had once felt suffocating now felt alive with possibility. People whispered, heads tilted, eyes lingered. For the first time all night, Lydia wasn't controlling the narrative. And then she moved. "Mind if I cut in?" Lydia appeared at my elbow, Richard trailing behind her like a shadow. Her voice was bright, brittle, the kind of cheerfulness that masks panic. William didn't flinch. "Actually, yes, we're having a moment." The words landed like a slap. Lydia's smile cracked, then tightened. "Of course," she said, her tone sharpening. "I just wanted to say how happy I am that Emily finally found someone. We were all so worried about her." William's hand pressed more firmly at my back. "Were you—" His tone was smooth, but there was an edge underneath. "Because from where I've been standing, it seems like you've been more interested in broadcasting her single status than supporting her." Lydia blinked, stunned. Richard shifted uncomfortably, his hand brushing her arm as if to warn her to let it go. But she couldn't. "We just want what's best for Emily," Lydia said quickly, her voice rising a notch. "Then maybe start treating her with respect," William replied, calm and unshakable. "She's not your prop. She's not your punchline." The music swelled behind us, but the only sound that mattered was the silence spreading through the crowd. People had stopped dancing. Conversations had halted. Everyone was listening. For once, Lydia didn't have the room. Her eyes darted, searching for an ally, but Marion was frozen, her mouth slightly open. Richard looked trapped, caught between loyalty and embarrassment. And I stood tall, letting William's words settle like armor around me. "I don't know what Emily told you," Lydia said. Finally, her voice brittle. "She didn't tell me anything," William cut in smoothly. "I have eyes." The hush that followed was deafening. Lydia's cheeks flushed, her perfect bridal glow replaced with something rawer fear. She turned abruptly, pulling Richard toward the bar, her train snapping against the floor. The music resumed, but the shift in the room was permanent. Lydia wasn't untouchable anymore. For the rest of the night, William made sure of it. He fetched me drinks, leaned close to whispered jokes, brushed his hand against mine, often enough to make it look effortless, practiced. And the crowd noticed. Richard's family, who had smiled politely at my humiliation earlier, now studied us with interest approval even. Mrs. Wellington, Richard's aunt, the same woman who'd suggested church groups, leaned in after dinner to say, "You never mentioned you were seeing someone so accomplished. Not everything has to be shared." I answered lightly, and the satisfaction in her raised brows was almost enough to undo years of Lydia's shadow. But the true climax came later during the garter toss. Richard prepared to fling it into a crowd of rowdy bachelors, laughter rippling through the room. Just as he raised his hand, Lydia's voice cut through sharp and desperate, "Wait! William, you can't catch it. You're not single." All eyes turned. William smiled, easy and unbothered. "Actually, I am. Emily and I are taking it slow, reacquainting." He winked at me, and the garter sailed straight into his hands. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. A murmur ran through the crowd. Tradition dictated he now had to place it on the leg of whoever caught the bouquet. But Chloe, the young cousin, had left hours earlier. "Looks like we need a volunteer." The DJ announced, his grin wide. William turned to me, raising a brow. His question didn't need words. My pulse thundered, but I nodded. The room erupted in cheers as I sat in the chair, my navy dress catching the golden light. William knelt in front of me, sliding the garter onto my leg with a gentleness that made the world blur. The air felt charged, intimate, as if this wasn't pretend at all. And the look on Lydia's face, her lips pressed thin, her hands fisted around her bouquet, her eyes burning, was worth every second of humiliation I'd endured earlier. The rest of the night passed in a haze. Strangers approached to chat. Cousins who had ignored me suddenly wanted to know everything about William. Even Richard's relatives looked at me differently, curiosity replacing pity. Lydia, meanwhile, spiraled. She whispered frantically to Marion, cast dagger-like glances our way, tried to laugh too loudly, drink too quickly. She wasn't the glowing bride anymore. She was the woman whose control was slipping, thread by thread. By the time the last song played, I had transformed from invisible to unforgettable. William walked me to my car as the night air wrapped around us, cooler and calmer than the storm inside. "Thank you," I said, my voice quiet but fierce with gratitude. "You saved me tonight." "What makes you think it was just tonight?" he asked, his gaze steady on mine. My breath caught. "Because we barely know each other." "I know enough," he said simply. "I know you're strong enough to stand alone even when no one else sees it. I know you're smarter than half the people who dismissed you tonight. And I know your sister. She's a fool for not realizing how lucky she is to have you as family." I felt something shift inside me, something deeper than relief. For once, someone had seen me, not the caricature Lydia painted, but me. He handed me a card with his personal number, neat script scrawled across the back. "Call me," he said. "Not for revenge, not for appearances, just because you want to." When he smiled, I believed him. And Lydia. For the first time, she'd seen what it felt like to lose. That night, her perfect wedding shattered, not with a fight, not with a scream, but with the quiet power of someone she thought would never fight back. And it was only the beginning. 3 months later, William and I were officially dating. 6 months after that, we moved in together. And exactly 1 year after Lydia's wedding, he proposed in the very same hotel where we'd first met. Lydia's reaction to our engagement was everything I expected: a brittle smile, a forced hug, and eyes that couldn't hide her fury. The sister who once mocked me as pathetic and single now had to watch me plan a wedding with a man who not only adored me, but whose family was wealthier and more respected than hers. But the real victory wasn't in proving her wrong. It was realizing I never needed her approval to begin with. For years, I had let her define me, humiliate me, shrink me down until I barely recognized myself. That night at her wedding, with William's hand steady in mine, I remembered what dignity felt like. Our wedding was smaller, simpler, but infinitely more joyful. Surrounded by people who wanted us to be happy, I felt free for the first time. Lydia gave a maid of honor speech dripping with fake nostalgia, rewriting history to save face. I didn't care, because the truth was mine and I was finally living it. Looking back, Lydia's wedding was supposed to break me. Instead, it introduced me to the love of my life and reminded me that the sweetest revenge isn't humiliation, it's living well. My sister wanted me small, pitiful, forgettable. What she got was the one thing she could never control: my happiness. If you've ever had family treat your life like a punchline, know this: you are more than their script. You write your own. If this story hit, you drop a comment below and tell me if you've ever faced the same. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive.